OMG, Zuzz! Boys, girls in between us, welcome back for another week of the geek and gaming culture news that you guys just love to gobble up. And I'm here, I am Red Gambit, and I am joined by Mr. Nairman. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Everything's going good here after a week of everyone out of the house, so yay.
Yay, freedom!
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think we all know that feel. It kind of sucks living with your folks and it's nice to get some space. So yes, I definitely feel for you there. How about you, Mr. Malimba? How are you? You don't get space, you're married.
There is no space, but it's a good thing.
there is no escape.
It's a Martha Stewart thing. It's a good thing.
That's right. I mean, you guys, like, people listening to this, you will be holding a white unicorn. This is a man who is a geek and has actually had sex and is married.
Yes.
How about that?
You don't sound too happy about it, though.
No, it's great. It's wonderful.
He says with tears rolling down his cheeks.
Pedro's tears.
Pedro's tears. That's it. Shout out to anyone who's seen Excel Saga. Anyway, that's enough about us. We're here to talk about all the news that's been occurring over this week. There hasn't been too much, but there have been a few notable examples that we will be covering. And first and foremost is the news that Devil's Third, the first release from Tomonobu Itagaki, the former developer, head of Team Ninja, the man who created what we all know and love to be Dead or Alive. He released his first game working from his independent studio Valhalla Studios after he had his nasty falling out with just Tecmo. God, who are they with now? I forget.
It's I believe it's Koei Tecmo.
Yes, Koei Tecmo, not Konami Tecmo. As always, I'm just going to use the excuse that it's too early in the morning here. Koei Tecmo, they had a falling out. He basically claimed that they were screwing him over in terms of royalties and payments and rights to things and whatnot. So he took his ball, he went home, he made his own studio, Valhalla Studios. They finally released their first game, and it's called Devil's Third, and it has tanked in Japan. It did not. In its first week, it did not even break the top 50 in sales, which means that it did not even sell over 1,000 copies in its first week. So I suppose the real question is, why do you think that is, Nairman?
Hard to say. I think it would be interesting to see kind of what marketing, if any, went into this, considering it is technically an independent publisher now that everything has been sorted out. He's in his own studio. He's not part of the big publishing firms anymore. So it's just interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what kind of marketing it gets, considering it's just something you wouldn't expect to see out of him.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know. It's a very Tomonobu Itagaki game because it's a game that deals with a lot of violence. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of those things that have sold pretty well in the past for things like Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird to see him, of all people, go into an independent side of things when he's probably the kind of the weirdest out of the group of developers who's now going to the indie scene to get everything done for him. Yeah,
fair enough. Have you heard about this at all, Malimba?
Can't say that I have, but I mean, I'm just having a look at some information on it now, and I mean, you know, if it's not featured at places like E3 and stuff like that, you're not going to get the kind of publicity you need to have a decent release.
Yeah, well, I suppose that is the question. Do you think that this is a failure because it just failed to get traction and exposure, or do you think this is a failure because people... I mean, stupid question, because it's probably not the case, but do you think people are moving on from the whole sex and violence being a selling point for games?
No, people are not doing that.
Yeah, I don't think it's that either. I think it's mostly just probably a lack of marketing and exposure sort of thing going on here. Considering I knew about the game's existence, but I couldn't tell you much about it, honestly.
Yeah, and I didn't know about it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw the game when it was first announced, and I kind of kept a loose eye on it since then. And, like, I've been a fan of his stuff. Obviously, people who know me know that I've been a very big fan of Dead or Alive, and I played Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2. I haven't played 3 because I heard it was terrible, but at least 1 and 2. And, you know, I've enjoyed the stuff to date, but I saw, you know, that game, and I just went, it just looks bland. It looks boring. I mean, you've got this really generic looking protagonist. It's like, oh, he's a bald, muscly dude covered with tattoos. Woo, and, you know... It didn't look like it was really anything that was going to, like, hook me as a player. There wasn't any reason to draw me in aside from, like, oh, there's blood and there's boobs.
Cough, Kratos, cough.
Exactly, very good point. It was like a Japanese version of Kratos.
Look, I mean, if you look at games like Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball, that thing is as shallow as a kiddie's wading pool. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's marketing that sells a game. As much as we all hate to think that, it is marketing that sells a game. And if nobody knows about your game, then it doesn't matter how good, or in this case, how bland it is, it's not going to sell, because nobody knows about it.
What do you think there, man?
Yeah, I can definitely agree there. I never saw it being written about on any big gaming sites. I never saw it being shown at any big shows, so that's probably the biggest reason why it's failed. It just didn't have any exposure, so no one really knew about it.
So you feel like it definitely would have done better if it had that kind of exposure? Because there was even some rumors circulating just a few weeks back that the game didn't even have a publisher to get released, and Tomodachi jumped onto Twitter and obviously denied those rumors pretty vehemently. But I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about how well or how interested people have actually been releasing this game in the first place, considering it didn't get that kind of traction at E3 or that kind of promotion that we're talking about.
Well, it wasn't featured at E3 at all. That's the thing. It's not that it was only smallly featured. It wasn't featured at all. And then by the looks of this, it was removed from the eShop. So the Nintendo eShop. I mean, coming out on the Wii U, you're certainly not doing yourself any favors to start with. But, to have it pulled from their eShop, that kind of means at the end of the day that's, you're pretty much dooming yourself to failure.
Yeah, what do you think there, man?
I can agree with that. It's again just one of those. They did a terrible job getting it out there. I don't think it would have done terribly well, but it certainly would have done better than it is doing now in Japan. At the very least, we'll have to see kind of what happens if they try something different or if it comes out in the West. But it's just one of those. You kind of shot yourself in the foot by not exposing it at all.
Fair enough. All right, well, that's what's happening with that. Let's move on from there. Let's talk about the Resident Evil 2 remake has been confirmed by Capcom. We've been talking about this quite recently. We talked about how there's a fan project which has been remaking this game in Unreal, and then now I don't know whether it's going to be a kick in the balls to them because it's actually been officially confirmed by Capcom. Now, obviously, Capcom are going to be behind the ball on this one because they haven't even started remaking this game yet, whereas that fan version was almost finished, as I recall. But it's still very interesting because, like I said, first of all, you've had the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which has been confirmed earlier this year, and now we're talking about Resident Evil 2. So these are two very, very popular sequels that came out on the PS1 generation. So we're talking, easily 15 years ago kind of territory, and now they're finally getting a remake. I mean, do you think that this is a attempt by companies to react to the fans and finally give them what they want, or are we going to take the more cynical route here and say that basic companies are looking for those solid sales, they're looking for the guaranteed wins, and this is an easy way to do it?
I think it's personally just a bit of both, like it is in most cases. I think it's partly them looking for some easy money, considering games do cost a lot more money to make, and because the games are 15 plus years old, you're going to have to basically remake them from scratch. That it's basically going to get the budget of a new AAA title, but with being a remake of Final Fantasy VII or Resident Evil 2, you're going to have that already initial install base who's going to be looking forward to the game, who know you're going to buy it anyway. And part of this is to help please the fans, considering, let's be honest here, many of the games back on the N64 and PS1 days have not aged well at all. So this is kind of a way to bring back what people liked and hopefully make it better.
What do you think, Melinda? Do you think that this is just... What do you think now? Why do you think they've waited so long? If it is, just a case of them trying to get that easy money and those wins on the board, that they've waited this long to finally turn around to fans and say, fine, we'll do it. We'll give you what you want.
In the case of Final Fantasy VII, I think it was basically just kind of like to me that was a cynical cash grab. Even though, yes, they cannot use any of the assets from the original game. That's just not going to happen anymore. But Final Fantasy VII is a cash grab because they know it will sell. Resident Evil 2, I think Capcom's kind of come in and gone, well, shit, this thing has a lot of following behind it. These guys are nearly done. They're about to kill our IP. or they're about to take our IP and do something better than we're doing with it. Let's stop them before they do anything and start, quote-unquote, making a game. Now, they may make a completely shit game by comparison, but it will mean, at the end of the day, somebody else can't do it.
I don't know about that, because, I mean, would be far from the first case where a independent developer or a group of people have decided to go jump in and make their own game based on a licensed property. And what happens in almost all those instances is that the developer will wait until the game is almost complete, the actual rights holders will wait until the game is almost complete, and then they'll do one or two things. They'll either sit down with the developer who made the game, have a chat with them and say, okay, we've seen what you're doing, we like it, how can we bring you into the fold? Or they'll just send them a nice big fat cease and desist order.
I mean, we don't know if they've done that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's gone the let's remake it ourselves now sort of route to it, so that's kind of interesting once you bring it up like that, yeah.
Well, you're right. Normally it is just basically either banhammer or sitting down with them, but we haven't got anything from them saying that they're sitting down with these developers either. So they've literally just gone, no, we're just going to go out, we're going to take our IP and go our own way with it. So it's kind of in that middle ground of we haven't heard of a cease and desist coming, but we also haven't heard of them working together either.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it could be interesting. Maybe they have that plan. Maybe they're actually planning to. Now that they've got ahead and announced it, maybe they actually have been already sitting down and talking to these people, and we just don't know about it. That's always a possibility that no one's really explored yet either.
I was going to say, yeah, that is definitely a possibility. It'll be interesting to see if they do bring anyone from that fan project in. I don't think they will, considering we haven't heard anything about that, but you never know.
Either way, it's a huge kick in the nuts to the guys who've been working on this for such a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, they'll get theirs out the door way before Capcom get theirs out. I mean, if Capcom are going to be developing their own version from scratch, as we all know, because there's no way they can use those PS1 assets, we're looking at least 2 years from now that we'll see this game, at least, probably 3.
But do you think we'll actually see the other game out? I've got a feeling that Capcom's gonna go, shit, if we release our game after these guys and it does well, no one's gonna want to buy our game.
That's possible, but I mean, if fans have been clamoring for a re-release for the last 15 years, I can't remember when Resident Evil 2 came out, it's probably longer than that. Yeah, I can't see them just going, okay, replicate it now, thanks a lot.
True, but as I've said before, and as Jim Sterling very succinctly put, AAA publishers either want all of the money or none of the money. So they're not going to stand a competitor's remake in the market because it takes away all of the money.
Yeah, valid point. What do you think? Do you think that people that when we get these remakes, because this is kind of a new thing we've never really seen. I'm racking my brain here. I don't think we've really seen any big AAA companies actually go and remake. I mean, we've seen HD re-releases, obviously, those are quite plentiful. But have we actually seen to date, I mean, Nairman, you might know, a game actually being remade from scratch of an older version, actually re-released?
Not too many from scratch. I know Nintendo has done a few sort of updates, graphically, visually, sound-wise, of some of their older games, whether it be the Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo, Mario 64 on the DS, or Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland on the Game Boy. They just did a few kind of updates, not so much remakes, but they're about the closest things to remakes that I've seen in gaming.
Yeah, so this is kind of a new territory for developers in the case that they're going to be remaking their own properties from scratch. That being the case, what do you guys think? Do you think that they should be completely true? Because this is something which people have been talking about with Final Fantasy VII a lot as well. Do you think they should be completely true to the original source material, or do you think they should actually diverge from that? Because Squaresoft have already gone on the record as saying that the re-release for Final Fantasy VII will not be the same as the original. They are going to make changes to it. They are going to make quote-unquote improvements to it. Let's hope they're not improvements.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see whether they do that or not, considering, let's be honest again, games from that era have not aged terribly well gameplay-wise. Some better than others, obviously, considering some still are classics, but, Resident Evils 1, 2, 3, those kind of early ones on the PlayStation 1 are kind of clunky, all things considered.
Well, we are missing, actually, now that I think about it, we are missing the very obvious answer, which the Resident Evil Remake on GameCube was actually a remake of the PS1 version, so there's a good example of a game that was remade from scratch, and it did actually have new areas included in it.
Oh yeah, definitely that one. That one was a good one.
Yeah, so there's good grounds for that. What do you think, Melinda? Do you think that people should stick to what people love about the games, or they should make those new areas and have those new additions and improvements to the game, as long as they're not, obviously DLC/monetized based?
It's hard to tell. I mean, at this point in time, can they make small changes? I think they would get away with it, but you're treading a very fine line when you're dealing with players' nostalgia. If you start changing stuff, and the problem is you don't know what part really. Everyone knows the whole Eris part of Final Fantasy VII. Everyone got attached to that part of it, and if they change that, the whole thing will go up in smoke. But the problem is, for an individual player, a lot of this stuff is based on nostalgia. So there are certain parts that everybody's nostalgic about in games. And if you change that part, you may get a segment of your audience that go, what the hell did you do there? And then, of course, you get, the online rage and that sort of thing. So they're treading an extremely fine line. If it's merely kind of cosmetic or mechanical changes, I think they could get away with it. If they start changing plots and storylines and the narrative behind the game, I think that's going to blow up in their face.
Fair enough. Alright, well, that's probably going to be enough on that topic for now. Let's move across to the D23. It's something that you want to talk about, Nayman, which is not anything M&M related, strangely enough.
Yeah, it's just that Disney's holding their usual conference every year after Comic-Con, so we're getting a whole bunch of Marvel news and some Star Wars stuff, as well as some Pixar news, so quite a bit going on there, although, like a lot of conferences, they're still being pretty secretive, like we're probably not going to get the Captain America 3/Avengers 2.5, whatever it's going to be called, Civil War movies trailer up anytime soon. We know some good details about Pixar, but they're not showing anything, and Star Wars is, of course, coming out later this year, so we're getting some news there, but it's kind of interesting that they're not showing much to the public right now, which is weird.
I don't know whether it came out of the conference or not. I know very recently that apparently there was a leak of what Luke Skywalker looked like in the upcoming Star Wars movie, but that link was taken down before I got a chance to see it. I don't know whether you know anything about that.
No, I didn't get to see it either. It was down before I got to actually look at it.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that, unless there's like a CGI replacement, I'm just going to assume that it looks like Luke Skywalker, only old and melted.
Yeah, I can imagine what he's going to look like. It can't be too different from what he normally looks like. It's just interesting that they're being so secretive about it, considering it is a big convention/conference that they would want to try and put more out there. We've seen posters of things, but that's about it as far as the public goes. Getting a lot of reports that apparently the Cap 3 footage looks good, but then again, it's Marvel, so it's going to wow audiences regardless. But just interesting that there's a lot of Pixar news. We know there's going to be a Toy Story 4 now, there's going to be an Incredibles 2 now, there's going to be a Cars 3 that no one was looking forward to because it's Cars.
How do they keep making Cars movies when no one actually likes them? I don't understand that.
Well, they sell lots of toys.
Because they sell toys.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that was the obvious answer, but I still hate the fact that it works that way.
Well, they gotta make money somehow, and if the movies don't make too much money, make it up in toys.
Yeah, well,
Star Wars originally made to sell toys. That was George Lucas's... I don't know whether it was George Lucas's or the studio's goal, but it was there to sell toys, and that it did.
Well, we definitely know that the prequels were. That was the whole reason Jar Jar Binks even existed in the fucking first place.
Jar Jar ... die.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I guess that's certainly interesting. Do we know anything beyond what's happening with like Captain America and things like that? I'm definitely stoked to hear about Incredibles 2, because Incredibles is probably my favorite Pixar movie of all time. I haven't seen all that stuff. There's not a lot of stuff they do that actually really interests me that much, but I have certainly seen some of them, and I recently saw Inside Out, and I thought that was good, but definitely, Incredibles holds a special place in my heart because it was just, perfectly tapping that whole superhero kind of vibe.
We don't know much about Incredibles 2. We know more about Toy Story 4 than we do about Incredibles 2, because I believe Toy Story 4 is coming out before Incredibles 2, but at least we know it's definitely in the pipeline, so we can be appreciative of that. As far as Cap 3 goes, we are getting some not unrelated to D23, we are getting some test footage of Black Panther from like on set and stuff. So we're seeing a little bit of that. Apparently Ant-Man's going to be in it. Just apparently the footage looks good, but you know, without seeing it ourselves, it's hard to tell. So that's just the reports I'm seeing that from like IGN, Kotaku, other places like that. That oh, it looks good, it looks awesome because yay, Marvel, we love Marvel. Everyone loves Marvel these days, sort of thing.
Well, the interesting thing about Civil War is that at the end of Civil War in the comics, this is a spoiler, but I don't care because it happened quite a few years ago, is that Captain America dies at the end of it. Now, obviously, in the comics, he gets resurrected or whatever. I don't fucking care because I don't like Captain America as a character, but it's interesting because he does die at the end of the comics, gets shot by Bullseye, I believe, and that ties into kind of the fact that we've heard reports from Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, that he's kind of done with the character.
Well, they were all tied into multi-movie deals, weren't they?
They were, but we don't know how long those deals last for. We don't know. I mean, do you know, man? We don't know how long Chris Evans is actually committed to the character of legally. How long he's committed to the character of Captain America.
I have no idea how long they're contractually obligated to, but I do know that both Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. are kind of done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're kind of just. I obviously don't know them, so I can't say personally if there's know anything, but there are just reports of them kind of being just done with it, whether it's boredom or wanting to pursue other things or what. It's just that their two main stars are kind of just done with the franchises, and that's got to be pretty bad for them considering they're building up to Avengers 3 with all these new movies that are coming out, so they probably are contractually obligated till the end of Avengers 3, but then they'll probably quit, and Marvel's entire cinematic universe probably has to restart at that point, considering their two main guys are quitting.
Well, I mean, we know obviously they have a lot of plans beyond Avengers 3 in terms of timeline and whatnot, so who knows, maybe they can keep it going with those movies that are coming out afterwards. It's kind of actually, you know, we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about what's happening outside of the MCU with things like Fantastic Four and Deadpool and whatnot afterwards when we do our quick topics. But is there anything else you want to talk about there?
Not particularly. It's just been oddly secretive on D23's front, at least as far as I can tell from looking up news and so forth.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Okay, so the final topic that we wanted to discuss today was Fallout 4 footage was leaked. Earlier this week, it was taken down from the YouTubes and whatnot and reappeared on Pornhub of all places. Malimba, that was something that you were interested in covering.
Yeah, and it's actually an interesting segue from our last topic, because I think a lot of, you know, the hesitation of a lot of big movie companies at the moment is to avoid this kind of thing that seems to be happening a lot, especially obviously with Fallout 4 with footage, in this case in-game footage, being released on the internet before they're ready for it. But I mean, you know, and when they're released at conventions and, you know, that sort of thing, at that point in time, do the publishers really think that they're not going to get online? So I think what's happening at the moment with movie publishers is I've seen what happens with their products the moment they're released at a convention, and they don't want that to happen. So now we're kind of getting this reaction of everybody's withholding movie footage, or the people that are going to these things, like especially if they're industry conventions, they're probably under NDAs that they're not allowed to discuss or show any footage for it. But yeah, it was quite amusing that it was shaky, you know, hand cam footage of Fallout 4's gameplay, and it was put up on YouTube and then removed almost immediately from YouTube, and then appeared on Pornhub, which is obviously something they don't really have a lot of control over. I can't even remember exactly what it appeared under, but yeah, it's an interesting place as an alternative to YouTube that this person's decided to upload it to.
So yeah, trying to take more of the underground route to sites where obviously there's things like trivial things like holding rights over something or being a legitimate owner don't really hold a lot of weight. Do you have any thoughts on that there, man?
Just that it's interesting that another kind of leak happened when companies don't want it to go out, and then it showed up on Pornhub of all things. But it's always just one of those weird situations where you might as well just release it in some form now that it's been out there and everyone has seen it. I mean, I guess it's different for games, considering it's not really, it's still very much a work in progress, considering it's, it's just off-cam footage of probably out of the developer's table or something. But it's just one of those weird situations where they probably should have just released it in full at that point.
Fair enough.
Here's a question though.
Yeah.
Like, do you think from here, seeing this, do you think we'll start seeing retractions by developers not releasing stuff anymore? Going to these cons and then basically saying, hey, yeah, the game's good, showing some still shots, and then not releasing anything else because they're too afraid that this stuff is going to get online. They're not going to do exclusives at places like Comic-Con and that sort of thing anymore, because they know immediately the moment they do that, it's going straight online and everyone else is going to see it anyway.
I think it's kind of a risk-reward kind of thing. Do they really think the reward of being able to maintain control over when this footage gets seen by the public is worth the risk of the hype and the build-up being damaged by not showing it to select audiences and allowing that, the press to build it up on their own?
Which is, of course, kind of hard to do without anything to actually show for it.
Exactly. So I think it's going to come down to the developer whether they really think it's worth exercising that level of control.
Yeah, I can definitely agree there. It's just a risk versus reward. And I think the reward is worth it, more so on their part. I mean, even if some stuff does get leaked, I think it's better to have stuff out there for people to see and get hyped over versus being super strict and then hoping people keep an interest even though you're not showing anything.
Yeah, true. Alright, let's move on from there. So we're just going to cover some quick topics as we do at the end of every podcast. So let's get back to what I was talking about before. Let's talk about, because I was kind of interested in, we're talking about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and how obviously it's doing very well. It's a machine for printing money for Marvel and whatnot. But there are other companies outside of Marvel who own the rights to some of those characters, and one of those companies is Fox, and the other one is Sony. It's kind of very interesting to me because we've seen, in the last couple of weeks, not only have we seen the new Deadpool trailer, which obviously everyone has talked about and whatnot, and looks very promising, but we've also seen the Fantastic Four get released in the cinemas, which has been, by all accounts, a cinematic abortion from what I've heard. It's just the absolute bottom of the barrel. Last I heard, it was like somewhere around 9 or 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's basically like, it's cinematic cancer is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I've heard very poor things about it as well, and it's reflecting in the box office, so it's just one of those, what the hell happened here? From what I can tell, it was a fight between the director and the studio itself, which kind of caused this mess, but ultimately, it's kind of weird to see a Marvel franchise not do well, but then again, it's not really Marvel's, it's Fox's problem, so I guess we'll just kind of have to see where it goes from there, considering Marvel would love to have Doctor Doom on the villain side of things, considering, let's be honest here, most of their villains kind of suck.
Yeah, I'll certainly agree with that. Melinda, do you have any input on that one?
It's dropped to 8% now. It was 9% before. Look.
Thanks for that.
Look, I mean, Fantastic Four's never had a good run to start with. So, honestly, they were pretty much dipping into a poison well. And yeah, when you have issues like that, I mean, when you have your own director coming out and saying, hey, I would have liked to make this movie in a different way, but the studio fucked me. Yeah, it was probably never going to be a particularly good story in the first place. So, honestly, just everyone's saying it. Let it go. Let it go. Hand it back to Marvel. Let them try and do something with it. That's if the brand isn't so damaged at this point that, Marvel would even care about it. It's quite possible they'll hand it back to Marvel and Marvel will go, meh, we've got Avengers, we don't care about Fantastic Four, it can sit on the shelf for 6 years or 7 years before we look at it.
Well, the interesting thing about the previous two Fantastic Four movies is that while they were derided by critics, and rightly so, because they were fairly shitty movies, they were actually commercially successful, which is why there was a sequel in the first place. But you're right, there were a lot of problems with there were a lot of rumors that there were problems with the director versus the studio, that he wanted to make a very different movie to what they were trying to do. There were reshoots involved, things like that, and he's come out afterwards saying that he wanted to make a different movie, but he wasn't allowed to, and it would have been a lot better, and whatnot. So I guess what's kind of interesting about that one is the fact that it's the problem. Here's the problem. The problem that, as I see it, is that outside of Marvel knows, the reason Marvel's movies have been so successful is the fact that they know how to balance what is inherently ridiculous about superheroes with a certain degree of humor and also a certain degree of serious tone. There's a very fine, delicate balance going on in all those movies where they're almost at the point where they're turning around and kind of winking at the camera sometimes, but not quite. At the same time, they've managed to maintain that balance again with a serious tone and serious topics and things like that. And it's worked very well for them. Everyone else, and I mean everyone else, has gone, holy shit, fuck that looks too hard. Look what Christopher Nolan did. It was dark, it was gritty, let's do that. And the problem with trying to emulate Christopher Nolan is the only person who can do Christopher Nolan's style is Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, pretty much. It's also hard to do it with inherently more fantastical characters like the Fantastic Four, where you have this giant rock person, you have this guy you can stretch. You kind of have to do it with either more grounded superheroes like Batman, or have some kind of way to make it a different kind of allegory altogether, kind of like what they did with Superman and Man of Steel, with the whole "I am Jesus" sort of thing. It's harder to do with other characters, so it'll be just interesting to see what Fox would do with X-Men and Fantastic Four going forward, and DC with all their stuff going forward. So it'll just be interesting to see what kind of comes out in the next couple of years.
See, I don't 100% agree with what you're saying, because you say oh, it's easier to do it with a grounded character like Batman. Batman is not a grounded character. Yes, he does have superpowers, but we're talking about a man who runs around in a bat suit with a cape and has no superpowers whatsoever. I mean, we've seen plenty of other directors, Joel Schumacher especially, fuck that up murderously, because it's not an easy thing to try and represent and have people take seriously. And in his case, he didn't even try to take it seriously. And obviously Tim Burton has tried to do that and has had varying degrees of success there, but I don't think that Batman is an inherently grounded character. I just think Christopher Nolan is so good at that style, he makes it look easy.
Fair enough, I can definitely understand that side of the fence of things.
Yeah. What do you think, Melinda? Do you think that it's... Do you think that I'm right? Do you think that it is a difficult style to copy, or do you think that people are just not... They're just not trying hard enough?
It's hard to tell, because, I mean, if you have a look at it, if you look at, like, Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy is basically very similar in this premise, where nobody has any special powers other than a bit of augmentation, and yet they have kind of tied it into the Marvel Universe very well. And then you look at this horrible mess, and you kind of go, well, obviously, I mean, Fantastic Four, to me, you can't do a gritty reality reboot. It just doesn't work, because, come on, like Nayman said, you got a big rock, you've got a chick that goes invisible, someone that lights up on fire, and a stretchy guy. You can't really go gritty and realistic with that. Yes, Christopher Nolan's a pretty good director, but at the end of the day, you're taking something that was already pretty stupid to start with, and then trying to Christopher Nolan it, when really that was never gonna happen.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Look, I'm not a fan of Fantastic Four. I never have been. And full disclosure, I don't think any of us have actually seen the movie. I know I certainly haven't. I know Nairman hasn't. I'm assuming you haven't, Melinda.
No, but then again, after seeing the Angry Joe review and reading a bit more about it, I just kind of went, nope, I'll get that when it comes out on cable.
I was almost tempted to see it just to see if it actually was as bad as everyone's saying, but I think that the other problem that's inherent with Fantastic Four that no one actually has really addressed is the fact that whenever you make a superhero movie, especially when you do a reboot, you have to have the origin story. You obviously have to have the story of how everyone gets their powers, and then you have to have the story about how you set up the bad guy. Now, normally in any superhero movie, it's hard enough to cover the origin of both the hero and the villain in a single movie, because that's taking up a good chunk of your screen time, just covering exposition and backstory and things like that. In the case of the Fantastic Four, you have to cover the backstory of 4 heroes, and then obviously throw in the bad guy as well. So that's 5 backstories you're trying to cover, which is largely a problem that I've heard from this movie, that like 90% of it is just nothing happening. Like you're setting all this up, and then the final 10 minutes are this ridiculous battle that takes place in another dimension.
Yeah, but if you ask me, they didn't have to. the origin was already there. Everybody knew how the Fantastic Four got their powers. They could have done that in like half an hour and just gone, yep, this is the backstory, this is the basics, you don't need to be reintroduced to the characters, you already know them. And then just gotten on with the story.
How do you feel about that, Nate?
I can sort of agree with that if they had been relevant recently. I think you do need to do it a bit for the Fantastic Four, considering they're not exactly an A-list property right now. Whereas, say, in Batman v Superman, you really don't need to go over Batman at all because everyone knows who he is. I do think they should have abridged it, though. They should have kind of started the movie with them getting their powers very quickly and then kind of moving on to more important things. You do need to go over the origin a little bit, again, just because they're not super popular at the moment, but they didn't need to spend too much time on it.
Fair enough. Alright, well, let's move on to the last thing I want to talk about briefly, which is Crackdown 3 was announced for the Xbone a couple weeks ago, back at, was it GDC? I can't remember.
I don't remember the name of the con either.
It was Gamescom, that's what it was.
Gamescom, yeah.
No, it was Gamescom. Yeah. So, what's interesting to me about that is that Crackdown 3 is going to be the first game in the series which has, well, I think it's got a female protagonist. Yay! But more important than that, it's going to have integrated cloud computing, which is going to be very interesting because this was something that Microsoft was showing off at tech demos back at E3, I believe. But essentially what Crackdown 3 is going to allow is that you will basically be able to destroy anything in the city, and those objects will basically, buildings will topple in real time and break apart in real time, and the calculations for that destruction are actually going to be handled in the cloud, then fed back to the Xbox One.
It'll be interesting to see if they can pull that off, considering
yes,
cloud for gaming has been very largely untested.
Yeah, have you seen this at all, Mal?
I can't say that I have because, quite frankly, I've never played any of the Crackdown games, but the idea behind it interests me, but knowing what I know about networks and extended networks and that sort of thing, let's wait and see how they go with it. It's very easy to do this kind of thing in a controlled, tested area in a tech demo. It's another thing entirely to try and do that in an open world area where you've got different connections, different speeds. Admittedly, at least you've got the same hardware all the way through, but I can't see it work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested in it. I think, I'm not a technical expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just trying to think of it in my head. I guess, when you think about it, I mean, lag would certainly be a factor, but at the same time, if the calculation, I mean, the heavy lifting is obviously doing the actual calculations of how objects would break apart. How they actually break apart is just going to be obviously a set of parameters or numbers which is going to be fed back and forth. The numbers aren't going to be a lot of data. The hard part is actually figuring out what those numbers are going to be.
And then telling every other client what that number is.
Yeah, but those numbers themselves aren't going to be a huge amount of data, I would not think.
Depends on how they do the physics, to be honest. If they're looking for realistic physics, that's a lot of data. But yeah, the other thing to me is it necessary? Is it something, I understand that these companies want to push the boundaries and that sort of thing, but I just can't see nobody, especially, the sort of people who are going to be playing Crackdown and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's going to look cool for about 5 minutes until the entire city's leveled, and then nobody's going to care.
Well, Crackdown has been in the past. I've played 1 and 2. Has been a single-player game. There is a multiplayer arena kind of thing for it, I believe, but the actual meat of the game is still in the single-player. It's not going to be just, it's not going to be like GTA 5 Online, where it's just random chaos fucking everywhere. At least for the actual, GTA Online itself is actually a different component to the main game as well, so I suppose that is actually a fair comparison.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with it. I just don't know whether or not, the infrastructure would be in place to support what they're looking to do.
Well, that's the real question, obviously. I mean, we've seen recently with Capcom with the Street Fighter V beta that, some companies have a long way to go with what they think will be an acceptable level of infrastructure and what they actually require.
I mean, a lot of this would probably be to do away with the idea of having massive server farms that have to support this kind of stuff. Like you said, obviously this is more of a single-player game, so they're trying to... I think I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to squeeze more out of the console by linking it to everything else. But then, what happens to those people who don't have online play? What happened to those people who don't have decent enough connections to be able to connect to the cloud and do those computations without the entire game screeching to a halt? You know, what are they saying? Okay, look, if you don't have an online connection, don't bother buying our game?
Well, I mean, that's always the argument that's made. It's been the argument that's been made for a long time up until now regarding, you know, games that have to be always online, so to speak. And, you know, it's, you know, a few years ago that would have been a relevant argument, but I mean, really today, if you're the kind of person who's prepared to go out and buy an Xbox One, are you really the kind of person who would not have a decent internet connection?
I know people who've got an Xbox One and don't have an internet connection at all.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, yeah, man, any thoughts on that? Any last words?
Not particularly. Just interesting to see what kind of infrastructure they will have for this game if they ever do decide to actually put it out there for everyone to play. It's just one of those. It's hard to tell how the cloud will handle it when it's actually out there for everyone. So we'll just put it in a wait and see sort of pile for now.
Fair enough. All right, that's gonna do it for us this week, guys. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Yeah, man, where can people find you on these webs if they're looking to hear more of you and your voice?
You can find me at NairmanBSC on Twitter, or you can find me on my usual channel of Brain Scratch Comms.
And same question to you, Melinda. Where can people find you if they're looking to hear more of your cynical and grumpy opinions?
They can find me at Malamba01 on Twitter.
Excellent. And you can find me at Kane Provis, KaneProv for Victor IS, where I post things regarding games, my channel, and boobs and anime and stuff people like. So just go follow that already if you're not.
So much boobs. So much boobs.
So much boobs. Like, just huge, raging boobs. I don't know if raging boobs are a good thing, but fuck it, we got those. Alright, that's gonna do it for us, guys. Thanks very much, and we will catch you all very soon.